Hello and welcome back. Today is Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024, and we are reading chapter 27 of Lirael by Garth Nix today. And I'm going to get right to reading today. I want to see what happens with this chapter. I don't think this is a very long chapter again, but I'll do my best to take my time and not make too many mistakes. So let's get started. Chapter 27. Sam makes up his mind. Despite his good intentions, Sam overslept and missed Touchstone's departure from the palace. Thinking that he might catch him at the south gate, he ran down Palace Hill and then along the broad, tree-lined avenue of stars, named after the tiny metal suns embedded in its paving stones. 2 guards ran with him, easily keeping pace despite the weight of their mail hauberks, helmets, and boots. Sam had just sighted the rear ranks of his father's escort when he heard the cheers of the crowd and the sudden blare of trumpets. He jumped up on a cart that was stopped in the traffic and looked over the heads of the crowd. He was just in time to see his father ride out through the high gate of Belissaire, red and gold cloak streaming behind him over the horse's hindquarters, the early sun just catching his crown-circled helmet before he passed into the shadow of the gate. Royal guards rode in front of and behind the king, 200 tall men and women, bright mail flashing from the vertical cuts in their red and gold surcoats. The guards would continue north tomorrow, Sam knew, with someone dressed as Touchstone. The king would actually be flying south to Ancelstir with Sabriel, to try to forestall the death of 200,000 innocents. Sameth kept watching, even after the last guard passed the gate and the normal traffic resumed. People, horses, wagons, donkeys, pushcarts, pool carts, beggars, all flowed past him, but he didn't notice. He had missed Touchstone, and now he would have to make up his mind all on his own. Even when he crossed to the center of the road and turned against the tide flowing out of the city, his gaze was absent. Only the vacuum created around him by 2 burly guards prevented several pedestrian accidents. Since Sam had started to think about going to find Nicholas, he found that he couldn't stop. He was sure that the letter was real. Sam was the only one who knew Nick well enough to track him down. The only one with a friendship bond that finding magic could flow through. The only one who could save him from whatever trouble was brewing for everyone around the Red Lake. But that meant Sam would have to leave Belissaire, abandoning his duties. He knew that Elamir would never give him permission. These thoughts, and multiple variations of them, swirled through his mind as he and his guards passed under one of the huge aqueducts that fed the city with pure, snow-melt water. The aqueducts had proved their worth in other ways, too. Their fast-flowing waters were a defense against the dead, particularly during the 2 centuries of the interregnum. Sameth thought of that, too, as he heard the deep bellow of the aqueduct above his head. For a moment, his conscience twinged. He was supposed to be a defense against the dead himself. He left the cool shadow of the aqueduct and began heading along the avenue of stars before the wearying climb up the switch-backed King's Road that led to Palace Hill. Elamir was probably already waiting for him back at the palace, since both of them were to sit in petticourt this morning. She would be cool and composed in her judicial robes of black and white, holding the wand of ivory and the wand of jet that were used in the truth-testing spell. She would be cross that he was sweaty, dirty, inappropriately dressed, and unequipped. His wands had disappeared, though he had the vague notion that they might have rolled under his bed. Petticourt, Belissaire festival duties, tennis rackets, the Book of the Dead. All of it surged up like a great dark wave that threatened to engulf him. "No," he whispered, stopping so suddenly that both his guards nearly ran into him. I'll go tonight." "What was that, sir?" asked Tonin, the younger of the 2 guards. She was the same age as Elamir, and they had been friends since they had played together as children. She was nearly always one of his guards on his rare excursions into the city, and Sameth felt sure she reported his every movement to the princess. Nothing, Tonin," replied Sameth, shaking his head. "I was just thinking aloud. Guess I'm not used to getting up before dawn." Tonin and the other guard exchanged semi-tolerant glances behind his back as they moved on. They got up every day before dawn. Samuth didn't know what his guards were thinking as they finished the climb up the hill and entered the cool, fountain-scented court that led to the west wing of the palace. But he'd seen the looks they'd exchanged, and he had a general idea that they did not consider him the perfect pattern of a prince. He suspected most of the city folk shared their opinion. It was galling to someone who had been one of the leading lights of his school in Ancelstier. There, he had excelled at everything that was important: cricket in the summer and rugby in the winter, and he'd been first in chemistry class and in the top classes for everything else. Here, he couldn't seem to do anything right. The guards left him outside his room, but Sam didn't immediately change into his judge's robes or make any motion to use the basin and ewer of water that stood in the tiled alcove that served him as a bathroom. The palace, rebuilt with economy following its destruction by fire, did not have the steam pipes and hot water systems of Abhorsen's house or the Clare's glacier. Sam had plans for such a system, and indeed some of the original works remained deep below Palace Hill, but he had not had time to investigate the magic and engineering required to make it happen. "I will go," he declared again, to the painting on the wall that showed a pleasant harvest scene. The reapers did not react, nor did the pitchfork crew, as he added, "The only question is, how?" He paced around the room. It was not large, so he'd made 20 circuits before he made a decision. At the same time, he arrived in front of the silver mirror that hung on the wall to the right of his simple, iron-framed bed. "I'll be someone else," he said. "Prince Samuth can stay behind. I'll be Sam, a traveler going to rejoin his band after seeking treatment for a sickness in Belisare." He smiled at that, looking at himself in the mirror. Prince Samuth looked back at him, resplendent in red and gold jerkin, somewhat sweaty white linen shirt, tan doeskin breeches, and gilt-heeled knee boots. And above the court finery, a pleasant face, with the potential to be striking one day, although Sam didn't see that. Too youthful and open, he decided. His face lacked the definition of experience. He needed a scar, or a broken nose, or something like that. As he looked, he was also reaching into the endless swim of the charter, picking out a mark here, a symbol there, linking them into a chain in his mind. Holding them there, he drew the final charter mark in front of his eyes with his forefinger, and all the marks rushed out, to hang in the air, a glowing constellation of magic symbols. Samuth looked at them carefully, checking the spell before he stepped right into the glowing pattern. The marks brightened as they touched his skin, sparking against the charter mark on his forehead, flowing in streaks of golden fire across his face. He shut his eyes as the fire reached them, ignoring the tingle under his eyelids and a sudden urge to sneeze. He stood that way for several minutes, till the tingle vanished. He sneezed explosively, inhaled with equal force, and opened his eyes. In the mirror, there were still the same clothes, with the same build of man inside them, but the face had changed. Sam the Traveler stared back, a man reminiscent of Prince Samuth, but clearly several years older, with a carefully shaven mustache and goatee. His hair was a different color too, lighter and straighter, and much longer at the back. Better, much better. Sam, winked at the reflection and started to undress. His old hunting leathers would be best, and some plain shirts and underdrawers. He could buy a cloak in the city, and a horse, and a sword, since he couldn't take the charter-magicked blade his mother had given him on his 16th birthday. It wouldn't take a glamour, it was too recognizable. But he could take some of the things he'd made himself, he realized as he kicked off his boots and dug out some well-worn but durable thigh boots of black calfskin. Thinking of his tower workshop inevitably led him to the Book of the Dead. Well, he certainly wouldn't take that. Just a quick run up the stairs, pick up a few things, including his little store of gold nobles and silver deniers, and then he'd be off. Except that he couldn't go up to his workshop looking as he did now, and he also had to do something that would allay Elamir's suspicions. Otherwise, he'd be chased down and brought back. Forcibly, he imagined, since the guards would have no problem taking Elamir's orders over his own. He sighed and sat down on the bed, boots in hand. Obviously this escape, or rather rescue expedition, was going to take more preparation than he thought. He'd have to make a temporary charter sending that was a reasonable duplicate of himself and set up some situation so Elamir couldn't get too close a look. He could probably say that he had to do something from the Book of the Dead that required staying in his workroom for 3 days or so, to give himself a head start on any search. It wasn't as if he were completely giving up studying to be the Abhorsen. He just needed a break, he told himself, and 3 weeks of rescuing Nicholas had to be more important than 3 weeks of study that he could easily make up on his return. Even if Elamir asked the Claire to find out where he was, a 3-day start should be enough, presuming she worked out what had happened after the 3rd day and sent a message hawk to the Claire. It would be at least 2 days before they replied, 5 days in all. He'd be halfway to Edge by then, or a quarter of the way, he thought, trying to remember exactly how far away the little town on the Red Lake actually was. He'd have to get a map and look up the latest, very useful guide to see where to stop on the way. Really, there were more than a dozen things to do before he could escape, Sam thought, dropping the boots to stand in front of the mirror again. The glamour would have to go, for a start, if he didn't want to be arrested by his own guards. Who would have thought that starting an adventure was so difficult? Glumly, he began the process of dissolving the charter spell that disguised him, letting the component marks twist away and fall back into the charter. As soon as that was done, he would go up to the tower room and begin to get organized. Provided, of course, that Elamir didn't intercept him and take him off to petty court. And that's the end of chapter 27. So I hope you enjoyed that reading. I will post chapter 28 tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And until then, I'm going to get something to eat. I'm going to keep doing Christmas decorations because I'm still not done putting those lights on the Christmas tree. And I'm going to get to editing. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care. And as always, may your magic manifest.